on a resume versus a CV. So with a resume, and what we're looking at here is just kind of a basic sample of what might be an engineering resume. They can be, the sections that you put on a resume can be very different and moved around depending on your industry. But for engineering, it's very skills-based. And so that is what we are going to emphasize towards the top of this. Typically resumes are a one-page document, about a 0.5 to 1 inch margin and 11 to 12 point font. I have seen students put try to get everything on one page and make it, 8 point, and that's really difficult to read. So we want to make it as clear and easy as possible, as we're going through these. So, and then again, they're industry dependent. It depends on what type of field you're going in as to what you are going to be highlighting on this resume. So for a basic resume, you should include your name and contact information. I think this one has some flaws because it does have the University of Idaho email address. I suggest you use a personal email address if you're doing that, a professional sounding personal address, just because after you're no longer a student here, then your email will get transitioned to an alumni account. And then it's really easy to make sure to just kind of use the same resume after another. And so just making sure that your contact information stays up to date. And you don't necessarily need to put your door-to-door street address on there, especially if you are uploading this. Just know that your information can get scraped. And so just having less of your personal information out on the internet is a good thing. You can definitely include your LinkedIn profile or website if you want to link to some of your scholarly publications. And then, yeah, just making sure everything stays up to date on that. For your education, you list the full title of your degree, even if you're still working on it. And then any academic certificates and minors. For any thesis or dissertation, you want to include your title of your thesis and dissertation. This is a little geared more towards undergraduate work, and so in engineering, especially electrical engineering, having your GPA on there is great. I don't know that that's necessary if you're in a graduate program. And relevant coursework. And this will come into play a little bit later as if you have a CV and you're trying to transition it into an industry that is not your primary industry. That might be a good place to put coursework that you've taken that is relevant to the position you're seeking. Make sure I don't speak through this. Okay, for skills, these are typically technical and tangible skills. So not things like teamwork or communication. Those are really more valuable if you tie them to an experience. It's one thing to say you have teamwork, but if you can prove it through some type of role that you've had, it's a lot stronger. And then skills can be either put on your resume or just listed in areas of proficiency. So you could use proficient means you don't need any help with a particular program. Knowledgeable might mean you have a question from time to time, and familiar with means you would need a lot of assistance if you were going to utilize this in a workplace. Other things that can go under skills sections include any languages that you know. And again, you can rate those as conversational or fluent. And any lab equipment, any technical equipment, specialized equipment can go under here. And that just gives any employer a good idea of how well versed you are with a particular instrument. And then experience. So I always tell people, kind of have this idea in our mind that the only thing that can go on a resume is professional paid job experiences, and that's not true. Project experience is really valuable, especially if you are still a student and you're working on a big project. And it's oftentimes nice to separate project experience or discipline experience with additional work experience. I don't particularly like other experience. I think that sounds a little, doesn't quite give it the clout that it needs, but if you were to, like, say you have some experience in biochemistry, but really it's just projects that you've done through coursework, that would be a good place to highlight biochemistry experience. And then if you had a role that was completely outside of that, that would be under an additional work experience. But we're going to, and especially for resumes, because they do tend to be looked at very quickly, we like to utilize bullet points to describe duties in particularly in resumes. So using really strong action verbs at the very beginning of each bullet point to help point to some of those soft skills, and I'll show you what I mean. So we do have this sheet up on our website, but you can use these beginning words of your bullet points very strategically to indicate things like communication skills or leadership skills. So saying helped customers is very different than provided excellent customer service by answering questions, supplying resources, and troubleshooting product difficulties. So that is giving a much clearer picture of what that person's role was versus just helped customers. Any questions so far? I am going to kind of talk a lot at you, and so I want to make sure that we have time for any questions. Any questions on Zoom?
So are we gonna get the presentation at the end? Guess you can go.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I will give that to you.
So you're still talking about using these action verbs, because we're looking at the space limit, which is quite short. And if you had to, like, write out the sentences, how do you mitigate, expressing yourself versus keeping it short?
That's a great question. I would say, if you can keep it short on your resume and then expand on the experiences in your cover letter, that can really help paint a good picture of your experiences. And you will want to try to put more emphasis on the thing that you're trying to go into, right? So if you're looking for a biochemistry, maybe position, maybe that has 4 or 5 bullet points, and other roles maybe have less. So you're just trying to weight it towards the role that you're trying to go into. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Okay. Other things that can go on a resume, any awards and honors that you have. Again, like I said, projects, any leadership experience. If you've had maybe like a volunteer position and you took an active role, or you're in a club or a professional organization and you've taken an active role, that's a great thing to put on there. Extracurricular involvement, definitely research experience if it's pertinent to what you're going into. And then any licensure or professional certification that you might have. And then memberships and associations. So these sections are really flexible. You can decide how it best fits your discipline and where your strengths are, because sometimes we forget about those things like, volunteering as being valuable on a resume, but it really does show your activity in your community. And especially if you take the time to belong to professional associations, having those on there. Particularly for the US, any protected information should be left off of a resume. So no photos, your age, marital status, weight, gender, citizenship status, or disabilities. That's all protected information and should not go on the resume. And sometimes if they're going through an HR department and they see a photo on there, they will reject it based on that, because they don't want to introduce any bias into the hiring process. We do recommend not using resume templates. You can certainly use them for design inspiration, but it is one of the things that does tend to get kicked out of applicant tracking systems. And we see them a lot, right? So they're very familiar. And so making your resume stand out by using a template that 50 other people have used is not necessarily the greatest way to go. Applicant tracking systems also read left to right, and so two-column formats like this are often very difficult. So like, for example, in this Carmelo one, it would say Mount Flores College, let's see, New York City, New York, assistant manager, Woodrow Bank. It wouldn't make any sense if they're reading it left to right. Okay, so couple of tips here. Don't be humble. Make sure you are focusing on showing your achievements and skills over your job duties. Quantify or give context to what you did. So if you are teaching a class with 30 students, make sure you're putting in how many students you're teaching. Or give some type of context. You're teaching a professional skills development class with 30 students. That gives a very clear picture of your role.
Like what your load was, like if you're teaching like a 4-4, but things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about what you're most proud of and if it can be included in your resume in some capacity. And we can definitely help with that. If you're not sure about it, you can definitely come and ask, but really try to look at your resume as a whole and what skills seem to stand out and are missing. What I used to like to do in the early stages of my career, I used to be a graphic designer, and I would go through and look at roles of like senior designers when I was still very young and see what skills they're looking for, and try to get those before I was ever looking for a job. So being really proactive in constructing your career and making sure that you are trying to get those things in some capacity, even if it isn't another job, if it's like a volunteer activity. Those are ways that you can help build out your resume. And we were talking a little bit about those keywords earlier. So when you are applying for a job, make sure you are very carefully studying those keywords that they're using in the job description and mirroring that in the language of your resume. That is absolutely how those applicant tracking systems have been programmed. So making sure that you are saying the things that they're trying to hire for in your resume to make sure you're drawing that line very clearly between your skills and the skills that they're looking for. So typically companies will use applicant tracking systems to just streamline their recruiting process. It really speeds up their hiring, especially, if you getting 200 or 300 applications. And they really are trying to reduce bias, but it does eliminate a lot of resumes if you're not careful in the way that you construct them. So about 70% actually. And so really making sure you are focusing on those key skills is important. We recommend avoiding those quick apply applications and apply directly through the company whenever you're applying for a position. And then list those top keywords, incorporate the actual job title, make sure you're saying the entire title that you know, and then using both the long forms and acronyms of a word like search engine optimization. One thing that I've heard that people do sometimes is copy the job description and put it in white and hide it behind their resume, like the text. Don't do that. Just don't. And so, but this is a good few things that you can do to try to get your resume through. Okay, so now we're going to talk about CVs. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about resumes?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned including the job title in the resume. Like where in the resume would you?
I'm sorry, that would probably go in your cover letter. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
This is Melissa, and I'm in the virtual world. My question is that I work in extension, and I myself, as well as interns, are being challenged to do teaching online. And so we have, pre-recorded videos of us teaching content that's either on YouTube or somewhere that the public can access it, where would you put the link for future employers to be able to see, you know, like a showcase of your teaching through that type of format on your resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. Are you housing it through a specific website?
It's usually found on YouTube.
Okay,
It can be hosted underneath, like, say, a professional organization or even the university. Or it might even just be the personal, like, public channel of whoever, whatever student that I'm working with, you know, to be able to
that's a
showcase their teaching.
So you could include, like in an experience, you could include a link in there that's live. The danger is that you want to make sure that, like, if somebody's printing off your resume, then that's not going to be very helpful. You could also put it in the header section. If it was to a specific channel, you could put it up with your contact information. You could also include it in its own separate section, and maybe you would list it media samples or something like that. So I think there's definitely a couple of different ways depending on what you're applying for as to where we could put that.
I like the idea of having a separate media samples section. I think that kind of draws attention to it and gives people a real example of what you look like teaching. So I think it's an important piece on a resume, but since it's a kind of newer, I don't know where to put it. So thank you for that.
Oh, yes, of course. I think, you know, in my mind, I'm just like going straight to treating it like a portfolio and being able to, you know, think of it as a portfolio of your work. So I think media samples would be great.
I wonder if, like, 'cause sometimes there's ways to, like, create vanity URLs as well. So like if
Mhm.
somebody has printed it off, instead of like having a big string of numbers, it's impossible just to type into a laptop really quick. It's just like
Use
it's
like a bit.ly or
it's like,
something.
yeah, or it's like a phrase. It'll be
Yeah.
like the website, you know, slash, and then like a phrase instead of, because I know some
Yeah.
I'm not sure if YouTube allows that or not, but I know like a lot of websites do.
If you're able to do that, that would be preferable.
Yeah.
All right, and one more question? What was that?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask, you said not to use resume templates. So does that mean that you gotta like format the whole thing yourself, or like what would
It's,
be a recommendation?
you can definitely use them for inspiration, but putting your information into a Word document and formatting it that way, is a great way to go. I know it's a little tedious sometimes, but resume templates are pretty locked down. So, your experiences might not always fit the sections that are on the resume templates, and then they can end up looking either really crowded or really sparse. And so just being able to format that yourself, is really beneficial. And there's different, like, definitely you can use whatever program you're comfortable with. So if you are more design inclined and you wanted to use InDesign or Canva or, you know, one of those, not Photoshop,
Mhm.
let's just say those words out loud, but, you know, or Word or Google Docs or something like that, you can definitely do that.
Yeah, I sit on like a ton of hiring committees at the university, and like we've just flat out, like, if we see a template, especially if there's like any creative or design element in the job description,
Mhm.
and then they're using a template, like they clearly like
You should be
we're-
designing that.
yeah, we're like you can't even design. Yeah, that's kind of the thought though, is like,
Yeah.
you know, and so yeah, we definitely we look at that sometimes.
It's,
So,
you can spot them from 20 paces,
Yeah.
it's for sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about, or let's talk about CVs. So, typically used in academics, and often international applications. A lot of CVs are more common overseas than they are in the US. Research positions in industry can also require a CV versus a resume. It just depends on what type of role that is. Again, distinctions are in purpose. This is more showcasing your academic achievements. And the length is different. So unlike a resume, a CV can be as long as it needs to be. I've seen a 45-page one here at the university. That's a lot of publishing. The sections are a little bit different, and we'll talk about that. And then you can include some biographical information, just depending. The design and style is also a little bit different. So how do we pronounce this word?
Vitae?
Curriculum vitae.
Vitae?
My time.
Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of, that again, depends on where you are, right? It can be vitae, it can be vitae. But it is really, and we just talked about that a little bit. It's translates literally to the course of your life. So that is why it can focus on a lot of different achievements of yours. So possible sections for a CV, definitely your education, any teaching experience you have, or if you are mentoring undergrads, that can go in there. If you are adjuncting, if you're a TA, any of that information can go in there. Awards and honors that you've received, and that can be, you know, as far back as it needs to be. Any grants that you're involved with. And one thing that's very, very important in a CV is transparency. So if you are putting a grant that you've received, make sure you include the PI on the grant, the amount. If you are listing publications of yours and you were not the only person involved in that, make sure that everybody's listed on that. You can definitely highlight, you know, bold your name in that series if there's a lot of people in the publication. Presentations and conferences. So conferences can be ones that you have attended. It can be ones you've been invited to speak at. Even if you were invited and you weren't able to go, that can be listed on your resume. Professional associations, any related experience to the position that you're applying for. And then those technical and programming skills that we were talking about. You can definitely include your research interests and volunteerism in languages. So for formatting a CV, again, professional font CVs are often a lot more plain than a resume. And in fact, I think University of Idaho has a very stringent template for the CVs that our faculty have online. Typically, you're not seeing color on a CV. And like a resume, you'll want to put your experiences in reverse chronological order. So starting with the most recent first. For US applications, again, you're going to avoid any protected information. And then just make sure you're being consistent. And I would say this, you know, for both a CV and a resume. So if you're listing your organization or a school and then your title, or your title and then the organization, just stay consistent throughout the document. Your name again should be the largest, and then contact information up to date. And then again, like a resume, you can redact that contact information if you don't want that out there. You can put a Google Scholar link on here, especially if you have a lot of publications. And that again, that would probably go in the header along with like a personal website or your LinkedIn profile. Those can all be kind of up in that top section. You'll want to list all of your degrees that you've completed or that are in progress. And again, GPA optional and industry dependent. But this is also a good place that you can put key courses if you feel like they're applicable. Definitely the title of your thesis or any major projects that you've done. The order is going to be based on the opportunity. So just depending on which, what you're going for, that's the skills that you're going to highlight. This one, has it in bullet form. I think on CVs, it's really more common to put it in a paragraph form. So this is not where we're listing concisely what we're doing in the same way that it is on a resume. You can actually have a short paragraph description of your experiences. Your publications and your grants, you're going to list them formally, and how you are citing them depends on your industry. I think APA is, do you have like an idea of what the breakdown is?
You mean how to format publications?
Yeah, like which style guide? Again, MLA is typically humanities related.
I don't know, I just make sure there's a hanging indent.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all, yeah. I don't know which one that is,
Yeah,
but
I don't know which one that is
I
either.
don't think it's APA. APA usually. has
yeah,
it.
MLA uses the hanging, I think, so that
Okay.
might be, I don't
Yeah,
know.
APA also uses hanging,
Oh, really?
but the way it's like the name, the way it's written, it's not.
No, it's like,
Yeah.
okay. So whichever is pertinent to your, what you're doing. And then again, conferences, like I said, if you are presenting at a conference, you can certainly feel free to list the title of your presentation. Or if you were invited to present specifically. Excuse me. And then the skills can be listed on here, again, technical and tangible skills, depending on the industry that you're going into. Okay, so altogether, this is going to be a multi-page professional document. Like I said, will continue building this the course of your life. So as many experiences that need to go on here can. If you are working in your field of study and you'd like to condense, you already have a CV and you want to condense it down to a resume, that's where we're going to take it back down to 1 or 2 pages. And all of the sections are going to be in order of relevance. So you're going to focus less on collaborators that you've worked with and more on your project skills and outcomes. You can always link to a website if you want the person to have additional information or a full professional history. But again, like 6 to 9 sections is not a lot of time. And so you want to make sure you're getting those key skills down as quickly as possible. And I'd recommend just having both, having a CV and having a resume. And that way you can tailor it how you need to tailor it. If you're working outside of your field of study, or you're trying to go into outside of your field of study, just place a heavy emphasis on those transferable skills. So you will highlight the things that are related to the thing that you want to go into, and make sure you're using those standard section headers. You might write a professional summary, especially if you have a lot of experience. And so maybe you make it a 2-page resume, you have a very short 3-sentence professional summary at the top. And that just is an opportunity for you to highlight how skills you may have gained in one discipline would transfer to a different one. So this is just a couple of tips for if you are condensing it, your CV into a resume. If it's for academia applications, make sure you're including your thesis title, your advisor's name. It will probably go to an HR department first. So again, making sure that protected information is not on there. And then you can add page numbers if you are wanting the committee to also reference your CV as well. For industry applications, we would just want to make those sections as clear and easy to find as possible, and then focus on your experience and skills versus your research. You can, depending again on industry, you can list your technical skills first if that's helpful.
Is there anywhere in the CV where you can accommodate referees?
Referees.
Yeah, people were gonna,
Um,
like, would it be something to art or take up for the CV or resume?
It's
so
it's usually its own document,
It's-
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's its own thing you hand in. There's like three things, like three documents you'll attach
Yeah.
usually. And it'll be its own, like, but like when you do your references, I think.
No, I mean like, you know, you worked in a company before and then the manager is a reference or.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
you like, have to be a separate document?
I would, yeah, because if you are turning your resume into a lot of people, then you're putting somebody else's information. And you can always list references available on request. And that way you're making very purposeful about who you're giving additional contact information to. Okay, well, before we move on to cover letters, are there any questions on CVs?
Can we simply use the condensed version of the CV as a resume? Just remove some sections and make the remainder as a resume.
So you can definitely condense it, but I would be very purposeful in how you're condensing it. Because you'll want it to be based on the job that you're applying for. So if your publications are not pertinent to a particular job you're applying for, then by all means take them out. But just be mindful of how you're condensing it to make sure you're
I
conveying.
understand the content matters, but I just want to know if it's okay to just use it in the same format.
Oh, well, you could. Yeah, I would just make sure the sections are really clear
Yes.
on there. Yeah.
Yeah, question.
Mhm.
So, when you're writing CV, do you also have to tailor, the CV based on the job description, like resume?
I would be mindful of it. So if you're applying for a faculty position, making sure that what you want them to know about you comes first. Some industries are very specific on how CVs are laid out. I know like fine arts disciplines has a very specific template on how you would actually put that. So if you have a choice and are able to do that, then just be purposeful about what information you're conveying first. Does that make sense to you? All right, so cover letters, they really are to convey your interest in the company and convey your interest in the position that you're applying for. They are meant to demonstrate value. So I think about it like this, you have 3 opportunities to tell your story, and your resume or your CV is one. Your cover letter is a great chance to expand on some of the things in your resume, and then an interview. So you want to be very intentional about how you are writing these and making sure that you're drawing a line very clearly between the skills that they're seeking and the skills that you have. So approaching writing a cover letter, a lot of people get stuck on where to start. But you're really wanting to study that job description because that's the key things that you're going to want to demonstrate. This is a place where you can make a claim about your skills, but then also expand on some of your experiences to prove it, to offer proof and why you're qualified. CVs are not necessarily, cover letters are not necessarily for you. They are for the person that you're applying to. And so, making sure that you are demonstrating that this is the place you want to work and this is why is going to be very important.
Question.
Yes.
Is there a page limit to the cover letters?
I usually would keep it to 1. Yeah, it's a very short one. So this is kind of what we're looking at when it comes to formatting a cover letter. And you know what, I said CV earlier and people make that mistake all the time. They think CV means cover letter. It doesn't. It's just kind of one of those things, I think, because it's cover letter we get tripped up on, but so the format is generally like this, and we'll go through this a little bit more, but in that very first intro paragraph, you'll want to add an add value statement. How are you going to add to that position, add value to that position? How do your experiences make you uniquely qualified for that position? So you're stating your interest in the position. This is a great place to name drop if somebody referred you to it. You could talk about how you heard about it through so-and-so. And then very proactively and confidently, combination of my education and career experiences makes me a competitive candidate for this position. This is my assertion. This is how I'm going to add value to this. And then you'll have probably 2 body paragraphs. And this is either demonstrating some educational experience that you've had or some skill that you've had. Maybe it was mentioned on your resume, and here you can tell a little bit longer story about it. And you'll do 2 of those and then a conclusion, and be very confident, avoiding words like I think, or I hope, or I would love to work for you. I am confident I will be a great addition to your team. Something like that, and then of course, thank them. So a little gratitude at the end there. But as long as you are using very confident language and very clearly demonstrating and expanding on some of your skills. So let's see. You'll want to tell the employer a few things about your qualifications that add value, of course, and set the scene in this first intro paragraph for the next 2 paragraphs. So for a cover letter, sorry, the window's hiding that, but you can, and it's a good idea to mirror the type of heading that you have on your resume to your cover letter, so it looks like a cohesive set of documents. I would do that on your reference pages too. And then formally address it. I don't usually like to say to whom it may concern. If you don't know who you're addressing, you can say, "Dear hiring committee." Your introduction: what is the position? How did you find it? And why are you interested in it? And then we'll have again, a body paragraph, 1 of an example of your experience and skills, and a 2. So I would take the time in these 3 paragraphs here to really relate it back to how it adds value to that particular position. So making sure that you are demonstrating how you're an asset to that position. And then again, reiterate your interest and thank the employer. If you can sign it, great. If you have a digital signature that you can use, this is a formal business letter. So that is the general outline of how to write it. Again, take a little bit of time with the website and making sure that you are taking a look at the mission statement or the value statement on a website to be able to tailor your document to reflect that type of language. So if the company is very interested in sustainability, maybe that's an example that you would bring out in your cover letter. Okay, that was a lot of talking. Thanks for hanging in there with me, but does anybody have any questions about any of them? Yep.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
So I was gonna ask, like, someone who's trying to get into the industry, like you don't have as much experience yet. And this cover letters are kind of hard to write because you are mentioned that you have to be showcasing the skills that you have acquired. So how do you, show that confidence versus that I don't have the experience yet, but
Right.
I believe that I can, no word believe.
Right.
I the word believe, but I know that I can contribute to your company, because.
Yeah, how do you do it if you don't have it, right?
Right.
Right. So I would focus on what you do have and how it can relate to that. So what are the experiences that you've had that make you confident that you can do this position, right? So it could be, previous job experience. It could be through your academic work. It could be really anything, volunteerism, anything that can draw a line from what they're looking for to what you have is going to be very valuable. And I think as long as you're keeping it, positive and forward thinking, then that just, again, demonstrates your interest in it. What's the position that you're looking
I'm looking at research scientist positions
at? Okay,
and so I'm engineering, I'm a physics major,
okay,
and I'm looking to get into the industry, which is kind of like.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I've had that, challenge of like, how do I express, like, push forward the skills that I have
yep.
and show them that I can be able to do this job based on,
So just know you're not alone. You can come make an appointment with us and we can talk that through a little bit if you need some help with it. Yeah, it's sometimes that's a tough one if you feel like you don't have it, but really I bet through a conversation, we can think of some ways that we can make that a little bit easier. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have one quick one on Zoom I wanted to bring up, and so Chris is asking this. I think it's probably a lot of people see this, is that when you go to like a company's website, it'll say resume/CV. It
Right.
won't specify which one. And my assumption is that usually, so like the CV is, like my assumption is like more academic usually, but
Mhm.
and the companies typically want you to tailor it a little bit to be relevant to their position,
Right.
which would more closely resemble a resume.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
I would say unless it's a research position where all of your publications are really important.
Yeah.
If it's a research position in industry, then maybe consider the CV versus the resume. But yeah, I've seen that too. And I think they kind of use it as a catch-all. Really just look at the position and see what type of position it is.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Go for it, Joseph.
I was just curious about the cover letter. It seems like it makes a lot of sense what you said, keeping it short and having those 4 primary paragraphs. But what if there are some like extenuating circumstances like in your life, or say you live really far from the job? Like, would you use that as a space to describe your life situation as it relates to the job?
You could, I think it would depend on how it would impact your ability to take the job. So if you are wanting a remote position, it's not advertised as a remote position. Oh, that's a tough one.
Well, like,
Yeah.
yeah, so for instance, like sometimes people will like, they'll, be applying here, but they live in Florida or something.
Right, right,
And maybe if, there is a situation why they're trying to come out to Moscow, Idaho.
right.
And it may warrant mentioning
Yeah,
very briefly why, you know what I mean? Because otherwise you're probably gonna look at that, and especially like for like entry level positions, look at like, well, why are they gonna move all the way out here for like an entry level position? You might want, maybe you're coming out here for a partner, or who got a job, and like those might be worth like 2 to 3 sentences.
I would agree with that. And that, in fact, I've done that before. So, applying from Portland, Oregon to a job in Moscow, Idaho, I've mentioned that I'm relocating to Moscow.
Or
And
just
that
your willingness to relocate or something?
Yeah,
And would you put that right in the first paragraph, just so like they see it and don't kick you out right away?
I would, yeah.
Yeah, because like the first one's kind of like your contextualizing paragraph.
Mhm.
Because we've wondered that too in a couple job searches where like,
Yeah,
we've had like international applicants for like positions that don't pay very much, and we're like, well, we just want to, we should be had a little more information about what
Right.
the circumstance was.
yeah. And I agree with you, Joseph, and like knowing that right up front is important. That just takes the question out of their mind.
I think in some applications, they usually have a question about like if you are, if you are willing to relocate or
Mhm.
not. So
Yeah,
if there's a question like that, do we still have to include that information?
Probably not, right?
probably not, but I don't think it would hurt you.
Okay.
I think, again, it just takes that question out of their mind. Especially if they weren't privy to that information when you submitted the application, like if that was just something that went to HR, I'm not sure why that would happen, but
HR.
HR. Any other questions?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, in the beginning of the cover letter, I'd like to know, I've seen some suggestion from our website
Mhm.
telling me that you're better to refer to exactly the leader of the selection committee, HR committee.
If you know that, yeah.
Use the name.
If you can find a name, that's the best.
That's better.
Yeah, if you don't, or you're unsure, your hiring committee is just fine.
Oh, another question. So I've applied to like a lot of jobs and most of them like don't even ask for cover letters.
Mhm.
So in those instances, do you have to like try to maybe, condense all the information you would include in the cover letter in your resume?
If you are not given the option to put a cover letter in, then I would try to paint as clear a picture as you can in your resume.
Okay.
And whether that means like expanding out some of the bullet points, still keeping it to one page if you can. But try to get in the most pertinent information you would want them to know in whatever however they're letting you apply for it. Yeah. Any
So-
other questions?
Sorry, yeah, one more time. So moving into, you talked about entry level positions, because you're trying to change your industry, for example, would be, you don't have that experience to definitely get you to, the higher paying jobs, but you just want to be in that space so that you can grow. So how do you communicate that space of like, I have had these experiences and I really just want to have a new or a different experience, without being like, you're like dissing all what you've done for the rest of it.
That's where you can leverage what you have done and how it relates to what you want to do. And I would say, those 2 paragraphs in the cover letter would be a great place to, again, keeping it forward thinking, as I continue my career, I can draw upon my experience in this area to benefit this. And I think it's probably going to come out in an interview. And that's another place that you can start to talk about that and be respectful of the industry that you were in and why you want to translate that. And so just kind of thinking about that in your mind before you even get an interview about how you would want to talk about that, why you want to go into this thing. And people change careers all the time. It's not unheard of. It's not frowned upon,
Yeah, because a lot of people
Yeah.
consider that, oh no, you're going and getting a PhD, then you must be going in the academia, or you must be
Mhm.
going in this certain direction. But what if you just want to go in the industry, but then you haven't had that opportunity to like do internships or, work in that space, and you're trying to break into that space now, and you're ready to start at a very entry level because you just don't have that experience.
Right.
But, and how do you, mitigate not being considered overqualified for the job? Like you get a PhD and you want the entry level position in an engineering firm. And, a lot of times they'll be like, oh no, I don't think you're gonna fit because.
You could do
you have
a,
PhD in it.
like if you were applying to an engineering firm and you really do want an entry level position, you could do a professional summary at the top, and just do a little bit of explanation there. I think that would be a great place to say, that you're seeking an entry level position.
And also like that awareness too, like understanding that, like showing them like, I know I'm coming in at this level and
Mhm.
being like expressing that like I'm looking for like a growth opportunity. Like that's what those jobs often, that's part of what they offer.
Right.
Yeah, they often don't pay as well as a lot of other jobs, but they are these positions that, put you in a position of growth, expressing that, showing them that you have an awareness where you're coming in.
That's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, but yeah.
Any other questions?
I have
Not
a
really. Sorry.
Oh,
But
go for it, Amanda.
I just have kind of a specific question. You surprised me when you said that if you were like invited to speak at a conference, but then weren't able to attend, that you would include that on there. I have that situation in my past, where I submitted a proposal, was accepted to present at the conference, and then wasn't able to attend. So can you talk a little bit more about like how you would include that? Like, would it just be the name of the proposal or whatever, and then accepted? And then like, how would you include that if you didn't actually present it, is my question.
You could do an invited to attend, and I would say, you could do like a parentheses, did not present or something like that, on there, just to be real clear that yes, you were invited, but you didn't present at the conference. I'll have to think a little bit more about that, Amanda. But I think, you know, the fact that you were invited to do it, it says something, right? So I don't think it's necessary to leave that off. I think it's important that you.
So is invited the same as like selected from a pool of applicants? Like, to me, it sounded like they just like found me in the crowds and asked me to come if I'm invited, but maybe that's
If
just.
Well, and you can, I mean, you can change that up if you'd rather, like, you know, it could be selected to present, but didn't, or, you know, we'll find a good wording for that. But I'll email you with a much clearer answer on that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So in the professional experience, so I worked as a freelancer, and like I worked briefly in the industry, and like I worked in projects which like, you know, have a name, like software projects that I worked on, they have a name. So do I also need to include their name, or is it okay if I just like describe what kind of software you were?
If you are wanting to, like, if saying the name would add some clout to whatever you're trying to apply to, then you can put that in there. You can also say freelance projects and then do a list of freelance projects that you've done. It just kind of depends. And I know a lot of these answers are frustrating because you're saying it depends, but
I have something like that though, where like in grad school, I was like a designer for like some web static open source technology, and like I didn't find it necessary to put the name of it because nobody's gonna care what it's like, not something that most people will ever use, but like but the type of tech it was, people might be familiar with like open static technology, and so like I just emphasized that it was, you know, because that's more transferable anyway, and more important than the actual. No one cares if it's like oral histories as data. No one's gonna recognize that, right? And so I think like that, I don't know, my own personal experience, that's how I did it. It's just left the name out. So
yeah, and it, like, you know, when I was designing, it was important for me to name drop my clients, because then it's like, oh, they worked for this person.
Yeah, if you work with Adobe, you should probably let them know that you worked with Adobe. You know what I mean? But yeah, for sure, or like Google or something. But yeah. Cool.
Any last questions?
Not so much as a question, but like the point about don't be humble, that really resonated with me, because I think I tend to like just downplay the things that I've done, and it usually doesn't make it look as impressive as
this is the space that you can get in and you can really show off your accomplishments. You know, when you're talking about yourself, it's really easy to downplay. We all do it. But making sure that even if it's a false confidence that you might have, that you're still using very confident language in describing your skills, and nobody's judging it. Like, you know, you really, this is a time where you can write down these things, be proud of them, show them off. And, you know, we can definitely take a look at it if you want a little bit of help with that, but making sure that you can confidently demonstrate what you have to offer is going to be really important. I know, not easy. Sometimes it's a learned skill. So. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.